So you want to know how to progress movements, the same movement. Well, we have a great question that's come through from Alex Seabrook, one of our Inner Circle UMS Online tribe members, and we're going to talk about inter and intraset overload variables in this video. It's going to be big. We're starting right now. Hey guys, it's good to be back. It's been a while since I've been on the show and I'm feeling good. I've been training very, very hard. I'm actually in a very depleted state at the moment in the middle of coming to the end of what's called a super accumulation program. It's a prescribed overreaching program. We can talk a little bit about that today. But I haven't been on the show for a while and it's really good. I'm here with Phil. How you going, Phil?
Yeah, good to have you back.
Yeah,
I'm feeling good. I've got my kind of sticky up surfer salt hair back. So I got my first sunset surfing in for a while yesterday, and I definitely need to prioritize getting that happening more because feeling great.
Yeah,
feeling ready to go.
It's good being in the ocean in the morning.
Right,
I love it.
so good.
Yeah. Okay, so we've had a really good question come through from one of our UMS Online Coaching tribe members, Alex Seabrook, in regards to this mesocycles strength testing. And all of our guys are coming over the back end of the strength testing protocol this week. We've got today and then what are we on Thursday? Friday tomorrow, and then it's done. And then from there, we go and design our programs. For all of you new guys who are going through this for the very first time, if you're watching, congratulations. It is a dress rehearsal only for you. You are not actually testing your load, maximal loads. You're just managing loads and greasing the groove on the movements.
Yeah, learning the process.
Learning the process, exactly. And it's an exciting thing. It's a very advanced protocol, and you should be really proud of yourselves for getting through it. It can be a little bit overwhelming. But for the senior guys that have done it a few times before, it is all about load testing and strength testing. We test a 6-rep maximum, which the guys probably have explained because it's just a little safer, a little bit less risk of injury, and it's more it's more unified across the board. More people can use the 6RM than a lower testing variable, but it comes, a lot of people come across movements in the testing protocol. There's 15 primary strength movements that we test, a mix of major movements, compound movements, and also more isolated remedial movements. And often you'll come across a movement that you really are lacking strength in. And a lot of the time, we talk about the 6 different strength adaptations, that most of them being in the central nervous system. Phil and I have spoken about that a lot in the past. You just need to bank a lot of reps in those movements to learn them. So it's not so much about just, the muscles. The muscles are there. The same muscles that are being used in a squat are being used in a single leg step up. But it's a movement pattern. I'm sure you can elaborate on why some people might be much worse at the single leg step up than the squat, even though it's sort of the same movements muscles being used.
Yeah, I mean, same muscles, but then you've got this whole sort of extra elements in there, like you're, bringing in balance, which if you're only ever doing sort of biological training, then you're, putting this whole new stimulus that you're not quite used to. And so, there's plenty of other variables when you start adding in unilateral stuff. And as soon as you also have, potential strength differences from maybe what your past activities are. Like I've talked about before, my past sport was ultimate frisbee, which if you haven't seen it before, go on YouTube and look it up, ultimate frisbee. But with that, you pivot on one foot. And so you spend, I spent 11 years quite aggressively only ever pivoting through my left foot. And, that means that I can, a lot of my squat testing, I'd, might be able to progress. But then if I go and look at my single leg work, then it's probably going to be a fair difference from just that many years of development of one leg compared to the other. So, this unilateral testing is okay.
Yeah, this is it's a big deal. The few of the movements are really, really tough, and Alex has highlighted 2 that we find probably most commonly failed, which is the trap 3 raise, the bent over trap 3 raise, and which is testing scapular control essentially, then the trap 3 raise is really unforgiving because it's heavily affected by our posture, and many people have developed posture that's sort of more suited to sitting in a chair than exercising in a gym, and the trap 3 raise is one of those movements that it's near impossible to get if you have compromised posture, if you're tight in the chest and you're your arm is fighting the restriction here to try and get you up.
It's one that looks like it should be so easy.
Yeah, that's
I remember
exactly
the first time
right.
I did it, I was like,
that's
oh,
exactly
yeah, that looks
right.
fine. It's just like, one of those remedial exercises. And
Yeah,
like,
and then you're like, oh my God, yeah. Look, when I first started testing for it, I was terrible at it too, and I just went to town on it for about 6 months and brought that strength up. And, I'll reinforce that it's the very essence of it being so difficult is why it's so important, because we lack that mobility and we lack that end range strength, and then we try to overload in those positions, and you're very vulnerable there. The second one is the single leg step up, and the single leg step up is the one that, like, I can put my hand on my heart right now and say, when I strength test in 2 weeks, I won't be doing it now because I'm doing my strength specialization program, but I will be strength testing in a couple of weeks. I'll probably fail the single leg step up, and the reason why is because I've neglected it. I haven't done enough of it, and that movement pattern just isn't going to be as strong. I'm not as bad, but for what I can squat, I should be able to single leg squat. I'll step up about 60 kilos, and I can tell you now I'll probably fail that.
Yeah, and just a reminder with the testing protocol, it's not that Yani won't be able to step up onto a step, like that's doable, but looking at those ratios between different strength movements and trying to hit those targets. So
that's exactly right.
If you're not so familiar with the protocol, then that's why it might sound a bit strange that you can't walk upstairs at the moment. Which with your DOMs at the moment, it could be pretty.
I'm surprisingly feeling quite good. Yeah. I actually had to take yesterday off because I was having a little bit of problem with my hip, and these prescribed overreaching programs, we have two of them. We have a beginner version and an advanced version. I'm doing the advanced version, and it really pushes you, and your body essentially at some point becomes heavily depleted, and you
found it yesterday.
Yeah, I found it yesterday, and it's surprising. It aligned with a lot of things. Like yesterday was the first day in a long time that I wasn't like I could tell my libido had dropped right off, my testosterone had dropped right off. Like you really do become quite heavily depleted. But then the idea is that you rest for 5 days and everything just goes through the roof afterwards. Okay, so let's get very specific with Alex's question.
And just before we do jump into Alex's questions, just for anyone who is watching live, really good idea to jump on now and get questions in so we can get straight onto that after we finish up with Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. So Alex has tested, he's done a mesocycle where he included the trap 3 raise and the step up, and then he retested and still failed it dismally. And his question was, should I program that again and make that a priority for this next mesocycle, or should I mix it up and try something different? Will I get a better result from that? And it's a really, really good question. And so today what we're going to do is, because there's no right or wrong answer to the question, but I'm going to share what I would do, and I'm going to share a couple of really cool little tricks that you can use if you are wanting to, because banking more reps on the movement is definitely going to be a good thing. It's about greasing the groove. It's about strengthening the neurological pathway. And before we dive into it, you're very good at explaining this. Why don't you explain just nice and quickly what it means to strengthen a neurological pathway?
So basically, when you're thinking about strength, you have the total size and types of muscle fibers in your body, and no one has access to all the muscle fibers in your body. Pretty much our brain puts a limit on how much we can access, because if we were accessing our total strength potential all the time, then we'd cause ourselves injury from ripping muscles off bone and all the rest. So that's how those examples of mothers lifting cars off babies, that kind of like people doing superhuman things in times of great need come about, is because we have these limits on what we can access usually. But when you add in different sort of stimulus, like there's some great studies I've talked about before, pre-ethics, so before science had to get really past through ethics boards, where they were getting people to like randomly fire guns behind people lifting, doing strength testing, taking amphetamines, cocaine, and doing all sorts of things that would not be allowed these days. And people are able to perform at a much higher level, like produce much more strength, because they're able to access these larger motor units. And so as we talked about before with strength development, when you first start out, if you haven't done much strength before, so much of what you're getting in that first 6 weeks is just that ability to access these larger motor units and produce more strength. So it takes about 6 weeks for then your muscles to start adapting and the size of the muscle fibers to actually get bigger. But there's so much potential for strength in accessing these larger muscle units. And that's why imaginary training and contralateral training and all these other things that I've talked about before are so effective.
Yeah, that's right. And movement patterns are the same because there's sequencing of the muscle fibers. The body has to fire and activate the right muscles at the right time to create a sequence that creates movement. And so there's what's called intramuscular coordination, intermuscular coordination. There's all sorts of different things.
And your body really doesn't like when you go into areas that it perceives threat. So with people who have particularly unstable shoulders, if you've had lots of dislocations in the past and those passive structures that hold the sort of the ball in the socket, if you've a bit weaker through there, and then someone might have really big strong muscles, but you try and get them up into a position up here where they're in abduction and external rotation, they will become very weak and not be able to hold that position because you've got these sort of parts of your brain that's like, whoa, I'm not supported here, so let's cut the access to strength here, and that's what this sequencing, this developing strength and coordination and balance is all about, is getting your body to trust these movements and allow you to produce more force.
Yeah, and the only thing that does that is repetition. So we know after that little discussion and description of what's happening in the body that it is going to be beneficial for Alex to repeat the same movements again, but it is also beneficial to change things up a little bit. And there's a few different ways that we can do that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So there's essentially, when you're programming, there's two different sort of macro things that you can change. There is the intra set variables, which are essentially providing overload within a set of movements. And then there's the interset variables, which is providing variables within the sort of workout or the grouping of the exercises. That can also be, it includes the rest as a variable. It includes the rep ranges or how you group multiple exercises together as a variable, like supersets, drop sets, hybrid sets, things like that, okay? And so what I want to talk about here is, first of all, the intraset variables that I like the most, which is manipulation of the movement itself. And there are three really good examples that anyone can use that I mean, there's many more than this, but these are the three that I've adopted in my programming and have had really great success with, which is, first and foremost, the easiest of all of them is to do pause repetitions. So you find the point of the movement that you're the weakest at, or that's your sticking point, and it's usually always the bottom. So let's take the step up as an example for Alex. You would prescribe a pause at the bottom range of the step up, at the deepest point where it's really, really difficult for you. And you can play with different time under tensions of the pause. So you can do a 1 second pause, a 2 second pause. I've gone up to 4 and 5 second pauses before in my squats and things like that. And it's a really, really great way of developing the brain's comfort in that end range, so you get that end range strength component, and B, removing velocity and inertia from the movement so that the Golgi tendon and the muscle bodies aren't relying on that stretch reflex cycle. So now you've got to, you lower yourself down in that eccentric phase, for those of you out there who are onto us about our pronunciation, and then you pause at the bottom, killing off inertia and effectively that stretch reflex cycle, and then you have to then generate force again from a standstill. So you've got to produce what am I talking? Is it inertia that I'm talking about? It's force.
Movement.
Yeah, your movement. Let's just keep it simple. Yeah. And so that's the first one that
Which
I really like.
Is, for those who remember our tendinopathy chat the other day, a really useful way as well of overcoming tendinopathy issues, because again, if you can minimize that stretch shorten cycle, that spring-like mechanism of the tendon, then that's really great for tendon loading. So
yeah, there you go.
Fun fact.
The next variable that I like to introduce once I've sort of exhausted pause reps in a mesocycle is heavy eccentrics. And I'm pretty sure we've spoken about how the body is stronger under an eccentric contraction. Is that right?
Yeah, well, it's not so much that it's stronger, but if you think about how much you could possibly lift in a concentric fashion, so maybe, if your maximal, like if you were at the bottom of a squat and to get back up, you could lift 100 kilos, for example. And if you went to 105, then you'd pause and you wouldn't be able to go any higher. That makes sense. But then if you go into thinking about with the lowering, if you had 100 kilos on your body and you lowered yourself down, that would probably be fine. If you're up to 110 kilos, you could lower it down and you'd be fine.
Yep.
So basically, it's the ability to lower without giving way and falling over.
Yep.
You can imagine that you could probably eccentrically lower a whole lot more weight than your concentric maximum. You just wouldn't be able to get back up.
Yeah, that's right. And there's statistical data that sort of says that you can lift 50% more on the way down. So
and it depends
150%.
on, you get better at eccentrics with training eccentrics. So that's why Nordic hamstring curls is such a great exercise, because it's building up that eccentric resilience, which is why it's so effective in injury prevention with kicking and sprinting, because you're having to deal with stronger eccentric forces. So it's something that you get better with practice.
So eccentrics is another really great one for the step up, and this is another way that you can sort of manipulate the intra-set variable and get a really big increase in strength. So
we're changing the size of the step, or is that do we have standardized ones?
Absolutely. We have a standardized one for this for the test, but I'll get to that in a sec, because that's body positioning, which we'll use as well as a good example. So the way that I would do that, Alex, is that I would say if you currently your maximal weight is let's just say hypothetically 40 kilos on the barbell, and that's where you're really sticking and failing, then I would go to 50 kilos and do eccentrics, and then step up with both feet, so you're not you're using a spring load, you're not just using strict muscle to get back up again, and then lower yourself down for a really nice 5-second eccentric. Usually the rule is that when you do eccentric loading, you do slow eccentrics, so it's usually 4, 5, 6, 7, even up to 8, 9 or 10 seconds. I've used 10-second eccentrics in the squat before, and it is brutal. Yeah, absolutely brutal. They're also fantastic for building muscle, because eccentric contraction seems to be what's producing a lot of the metabolic damage to the tissue.
Yeah, and you'll notice if you've not really done it before, you'll probably really get that DOMS
really hurt.
in a big way the next day, and that is that because you're lengthening under tension, which causes just little micro tears, which is a good thing. It's what we want. It's about getting that right amount, that you're giving enough stimulus to get stronger without so much that you're not able to train.
That's right. Okay, so the final one that I am a huge fan of out of the 3 intraset overload variables is body positioning, and we call that mechanical drop sets, where you actually alter the body position during the set as you start to fatigue and fail. So as an example of what Phil just said there, you can change the depth of the step up. You can do that as a full set if you wanted to, or you could start doing a really deep step up for the first couple of reps. Once that fatigues, you can then reduce or restrict the range of motion and slowly do that until you take your body to failure in a few different points. And that's just another great way of getting the volume up, the total volume, on a heavy weight, manipulating it as you go through. And then, of course, outside as an interset variable, you can change the step height from the get, and you just do a different step height the whole way through, So there's 3 really great ways that you can do it there, and the body positioning is the way that you would progress the trap 3 raise really easily.
Okay. And one way to think about it is if you were to hold a weight out in front of you with your arm at 90 degrees, that's going to be a whole lot harder because of the leverage involved. Whereas if you think about if you hold a weight up above your head like this, you could probably hold quite a heavy weight for quite a long time. Getting it there might be a bit hard, but with the weight going directly down through your arm, you've got a lot less muscular force at your deltoids that needs to work. So with changing the angle of the inclined bench that you're using, you can really change it up to make it harder. And the other thing to think about is with inner and outer range of your muscles, that's when you're going to be weakest. So that's when you're nearly at a stretch position, or when you're at a totally contracted position, you might notice if you're in that totally contracted position, it's where your cramps lie.
Yep.
But that mid range is where you're going to be strongest. So as you get flatter and flatter on the bench, it's going to be quite a lot harder at that final range. So when you're lifting the arm up into the end of that rep, if you're more horizontal, then that's going to be a lot of leverage at your inner range and going to be quite challenging.
Yep.
Whereas if you go more upright, it's going to be easier.
That's right. And the way we test the trap 3 at the flat horizontal position. But as Phil just explained, going up to a 45-degree trap 3 raise is much easier. It's harder at the bottom, but that's generally where we're stronger.
Yeah.
And then at the top, it gets much easier, so you can get that end range. Then you can go down to a 30-degree trap 3 on an angle, and that's going to be harder in the mid-range, but it's a little bit easier top and bottom. And then, so you can manipulate the angle of the body to get a completely different effect in the exercise. Still using the same muscles, still banking that neurological, strengthening that neurological pathway, banking repetitions, but you get a really great training effect from it, which is great. So now, while we're on interset variables, so we're now outside of the set itself, but we're changing variables within the workout, we can talk about the neurological pathway. And that is the easiest way to manipulate the pathway itself is manipulating the apparatus that we use. So a great example for a trap 3 raise is transitioning from a dumbbell to a cable or a band trap 3 raise. And then you can go and start doing half kneeling trap 3 raises, kneeling trap 3 raises rather than a bent over leaning on something. You can do a standing trap 3 raise. There's a lot of different variables you can do, and you're still going to be greasing the groove for the same movement, but changing it up and forcing the body and the nervous system to adapt slightly differently.
And you can see if you're doing a banded trap 3 raise and you're in that standing position, which we talked about would be the easiest for the weight, because at the top you have very little force because it's going straight down through your arm. If you had a band, then when the band is at its most stretched position as you're at the top, that's now going to be the hardest. So you can see how that would really change how you're loading things. So
that's exactly right. So there's a couple of really, really good examples of how we can manipulate movements. And I like to keep it simple, because when you start to go into inter and intraset overload variables, oh man, there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of great traditional bodybuilding variables, 21s, 7s, all these different loading variables to crank, and they're all designed to get more volume into a movement. And I am a really big fan of keeping it simple with movement selection. Like, movement selection doesn't need to be really elaborate. Like most of the guys I know that get the best results in strength really keep it simple with their movement selection, but they understand how to manipulate the variables of each of those movements in their programming, so that when they keep doing the same movement over and over again, it's a slight variation of that movement, or it's a slight variation of the variables that they're using to load that
still
movement.
Progressively overloading that movement. Whereas if you oscillate wildly between one
Different
sort of
movements.
really, specialized thing that kind of mimics a golf swing or something, and then you go off to something else that, you go to through a phase of conventional strength training, and then you go off and do calisthenics, then you can see how you haven't really got this kind of gradual increase in how you're loading those structures. So you often don't get anywhere.
Yep, that's exactly right. Now, that actually brings me, while we're on it, to a question that Alex asked in follow-up to what we're answering right now, which was that our program card, if you scroll down to the bottom there, it'll be the last question, I think. Our program card, he says, nice one, I'll give that a go. Another question I have is, when you guys are going to post videos for the more advanced exercises, most of the videos only go to around 4 to 5 exercises per muscle group, body part, whereas the program card has 7 to 10 exercises per body part. So the simple answer to this, Alex, is that we used to write these really elaborate programs that were designed really from my bodybuilding days back when I was in my 20s, and that was all about just getting swole. And you used to sort of attack the muscle from as many different angles as possible to try and get it to grow, and
so a superset would be...
Yeah. I used to write programs for myself and for my clients that sometimes had up to 10, 12 exercises on one muscle group,
Yeah.
And the reason why we no longer do that is because we've now had the luxury of being in the game for almost 18 years and like training intensely in gyms. And I've trained with a lot of really successful people, who are at the top of their game in calisthenics, bodybuilding, powerlifting, strongman, things like that, CrossFit even. And the thing that blew my mind is that their workouts consist of only a few movements. Like literally, I've seen CrossFitters who blew my mind with what they could do. And I look at their programming and their workouts are 2 or 3 movements and just insane amounts of volume on those movements. I got friends who probably have the most amazing physique that I've ever seen, other than professional bodybuilders who just take it to a whole nother level. And their workouts never consist of more than 4 movements. They just keep it simple and bank a lot of volume on movements that are big bang for your buck movements. Now, when we were personal trainers in the early days and when we had designed these program cards that have all of this space there, one of the key considerations that we took into effect was keeping people entertained. When you're training general populations who half of your job as a personal trainer is just to keep them coming to the gym in the first place, there is an element of them getting bored with doing the same thing over and over and over again. And so we would often prescribe 8 exercises in a workout, but only 2 sets of each exercise, just purely so they didn't get bored. And also because we were working in big box, big chain gyms over here in Australia, it's Fitness First that we spent 10 years as personal trainers. And you weren't allowed to stay on the same piece of equipment for an hour, with a client. It was just the culture was that was really bad etiquette. So to answer your question with the program card, why does it extend to 10 exercises? That's pretty much it, because we used to program not for what was the best for the individual. It was for what suited the environment we were in, and because we were training general populations a lot more back then.
I feel like the what you've done has developed and it keeps developing over the years. So
that's exactly right. Yeah,
things have changed, and as Rad and I talked about yesterday, like we're always looking for what the program is now might look different in 2 years' time, because we're always adapting and trying to make it the best possible thing. So the things change, but
that's exactly right. I hope that answers your question. Like what Einstein has he was very famously quoted saying that there's 5 levels of genius and or intellect, sorry. And the first one was smart, then clever, then it went to genius, and then the 5th stage was simple. That is so important to understand. Simplicity is everything in training. Like you get such a better result when you keep things simple and focus on good proven movements that are going to deliver the best results possible.
And consistency with the overload as well. And
that's exactly right.
It's much more powerful to do that with these simple exercises that you can tweak with these variables we talked about.
And that went for calisthenics as well. I've worked with some of the best handstand coaches in the world, and the guy I'm thinking of that comes to mind first is Miguel Santana, who is incredible, and we've had him here at the gym, and I've worked with him, done workshops with him and things like that. And he gave me a program that consisted of 3 exercises, and I said, how long do I do this for? And he said, until I come back in 2 years. Literally 3 exercises, just over and 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 over again. And I was like, I thought he was joking, but he was serious. He just said, keep doing these until I come back. And we weren't planning to get him back for 2 years. And I was just like, oh my God, they're not really fun exercises to do. Rad did Kung Fu for, 10 years, 15 years, very seriously, 5 days a week. And you should have seen when we first opened the gym, he used to do these 2 drills, this horse stance and this rooster walk that was like monotonous. It was painful watching him do it for hours and hours. And there's those classic, martial arts and kung fu movies like Van Damme and things like that, where they're training and they're just holding this bloody position for hours and hours and hours on end with candles burning under their armpits or something. These stances. that's what building strength is about. It's about developing insane levels of strength in very, very minimal. Bruce Lee was very famously quoted saying, "I don't fear the man with 100 kicks. I fear the man who's mastered one." Because it's like the power you generate from mastering that one movement over 100 years is just insane, or however many years that you've trained it. I don't know if I probably made a mess of that quote, Bruce. Sorry, but you get my
Bruce
point.
is watching out there.
Yeah, that's right. Well, if Rad's watching, he's going to come in and kick me in the head for that.
So Cork has a question here. It says, "Hey Yani, on the program card, you guys have an intensity level column at the pre-column. How do I rate that? Can you give me an example for yourself, like in squats or deads or handstand?"
Okay, yeah, that's a very good question. The intensity level is, there's different ways of measuring it: perceived rate of exertion, intensity, that sort of thing. It completely depends on the individual, and this is where it gets a little bit sort of personal, and it's based on training age. So, training age is a way that we indicate or we measure how long you've been exercising for under this protocol. So, for instance, someone can come to me with 20 years of marathon running experience, be one of the fittest people I've ever met, but if they have never done strength training in the way that we do it, they're still a 0 when they walk in the door in training age, because their previous training history isn't a good depiction of what they're going to be like under these new variables, if that makes sense. So we always sort of figure out what someone's been doing, and it's specific to weightlifting or calisthenics for us, and stretching. And then every year that you do a year consistently without breaking for more than a week or two, you go up 1 year in training age. So most of the guys here at Unity Gym are 2, 3, 4 maybe. The oldest is maybe 5 or 6, and every year that you go up in training age, the intensities that you need to play the game in become higher. You want to sort of, after the first 2 years, when you've really banked that foundational strength and your tissues have remodeled, the deeper connective tissues have had time to sort of remodel and become stronger and adapt to the strength training variables, you want to be training at above 70% of your maximal effort pretty much always, unless you're doing a deload week. So to answer the question, Quack, it's really dependent on your training age and where you're at in the mesocycle. So if you're not doing a deload...
Oh, he's put PRE, but he means RPE. Is that right? Or perceived rate of exertion?
Perceived rate of exertion, PRE.
I always do it as RPE.
RPE, rate of perceived exertion is the way they do it,
I was thinking it was an intensity before he's actually started the exercise.
No, perceived rate of exertion.
Yeah, we do RPE. Okay.
So, the easy way of answering that, Quack, is that I like people to stay at a 7 or an 8 on the perceived rate of exertion scale, and at your level. If they're a beginner, I don't like people reaching a 7 just yet. I like people being around the 5 and 6 mark, because when they're at a 5 or 6, I know that every rep is going to look the same. Whereas when you start to go 7, 8, 9 even, then the last couple of reps usually look like shit, because you're taking it to failure and you start, But if you watch someone who is, a very good example is my friend Ben Pokolsky. I've trained with Ben a couple of times, and I will watch through an entire workout, every single rep of his looks the same. It's phenomenal to watch someone who's trained to that level, and he will go to absolute breaking point. And those guys, those bodybuilders, are machines. Like, you see him, grunting and going for it and really going to failure, but the rep won't change. It'll look exactly the same the whole way through, but he'll look like he's about to explode in the head, and he'll get to there and his spotter will help him finish the rep and it'll look perfect. But when you take someone who's under a training age of about 5 years, their last few reps when they go to failure won't look perfect, and there's a lot of people that argue that that's not a good thing. You know,
there are plenty of people who train for 5 years but don't have that same intention, and they won't get there either.
Yeah.
You need to be really intentional about this stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, and I got another friend, an example down the road, or he's not down the road anymore. Sebastian Orab, Australian strength coach, who's training for a competition at the moment, and I watched him do a 1 rep maximum at 365 kilo squat. He posted a video, and then shortly after he posted a video of doing like 330 kilos for 2 or 3 reps, and they looked exactly the same.
Yeah, he'd often sort of get frustrated, like when I did massages for him 90 minutes a week, and so we'd chat a lot, and he'd say like, oh, I'm getting all these messages from people being like, oh, you could have got more on that, but what they don't understand is if I went any heavier, like it has to be perfect for it to work. And
that's exactly
if it's
right.
not perfect, it will not work.
Yeah.
So for my PBs, they always look, really good.
It looks like there's more in the tank. When you
Yeah.
watch someone like that, you think, oh wow, it looks like, but he's lifting on the absolute limit of his perfect. And if it deviates from perfect, it either results in him hurting himself severely or him, really making a mess of his body just through a strain or something like that,
And so just to be clear with the PRE or RPE, as I call it, is, for him that'd be a 10.
Yep.
But, it's around that training age and the intention around your training. If you can, as you develop and you get better at this, then your RPEs can be, higher, and you can be still maintaining really good form. But
that's exactly right.
It's going to be less.
In the beginning, you aim for a 7, and as you get really, really good at it, and there are other ways of measuring this sort of thing. One of the best is bar speed or movement, a movement speed, and you can buy really cool little what are they called? There's a little box that you attach a little string to the bar or the dumbbell. Yeah. We're running out of time. Richie's giving me the wind-up cue. And it measures bar speed. And that's one of the ways that we do it in a strength and conditioning environment to make sure that because perceived rate of exertion is heavily subjective, whereas bar speed is not. You get the metrics, you put it into the computer, and you can see, okay, those last 2 reps, you took it too far because you slowed right down, and you want it to be consistent. And that's another thing that you'll see with Sebastian's squat the other day. His 2 reps at 230, it was either 2 or 3. I'm sorry, Bass, if I'm making a mess of this. His multiple reps were exactly the same speed as his 1 rep maximum.
Yeah.
And that's these guys are like precise with that.
Yeah. And just one last bit on why rate of perceived exertion is such a useful thing to be tracking all the time as well, is that it's such a useful thing for, if you are tracking the weights you're lifting and you're going up and up and up, and then you get to a session where you're like, oh, I'm doing a warm-up and my RPE is just going through the roof, and you get to, you're trying to do a weight that you did like the week before, which felt totally easy, and it's just like where its rate of perceived exertion was at a 7 and now it's feeling like a 9, then that's a really good kind of feedback to think like, okay, what else in my life could be, playing into this, my sleep, my nutrition, all these things. Is it time for a bit of a deload week? Like, these are the things that protect you from those kind of overtraining injuries that can really hold you back.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Very useful thing to track.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just takes a little bit of practice to get good at tracking it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I hope we've answered all of those questions. Inter and intra-set variables, there's a lot of them. It's a big sort of Pandora's box that you can open. My favorite intra-set variables are pause reps, eccentrics, and what we call mechanical drop sets, where we alter the body position. There are also hybrid sets, which are really, really good, which is that you really change it completely. That's another favorite of Rad's. And then inter-set variables, you've got supersets, drop sets, all sorts of different cool things that you can do.
We can get stuck into it.
But, awesome.
Thanks for watching today. Make sure to jump on the podcast and subscribe if you haven't already.
Yeah, hello everyone on YouTube as well, because these are going up on YouTube, and hello to everyone on the podcast. Thank you.
We've hit on the podcast, got over 850 listens or something, so very exciting. Fantastic. Please share it with you.
We're tipping on 20,000 subscribers on YouTube. So let's go, people. Let's get us there by the end of the month.
Live watchers who are really stuck on YouTube and haven't come across to the Facebook Movement Mastermind group, this week we've had some challenge is getting everything up and running, so we're getting them out in the same day. But we're working on that.
They are going to come. They are going to come. Yep,
we're just figuring out
absolutely.
the system.
Thanks, Quoc, for joining us and asking us a few questions. Thanks, Alex, for your great question. And this is why we're doing it on Facey, guys, because we can really critique movement and things like that, which we
Post
love.
videos, ask questions.
Yeah, that's right. See you all tomorrow. Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, that's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that
It's
far.
the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.